Stay tuned for our next episode with Cory Doran. Hi, Cory Doran.
Hello, Kate. How you doing?
I'm good. This is the Reel Talk podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. It looks very real.
Cory,
like a podcast. Let's talk.
It does look like a podcast. Let's talk. Okay. You're a member of the bargaining team.
Mm-hmm.
You're an ACTRA member. I've kind of gone in opposite orders. And you predominantly work in voice. Is that right?
Yeah. Nowadays, predominantly work in voice. I'd say animation is definitely where I live the most.
Mm-hmm.
However, lots of commercial experience, audiobook experience, and video game stuff.
And I'm like pretending not to know, but you won a pretty big ACTRA award this year. Right?
Yes, I did. I won the ACTRA Award for male or gender non-conforming voice performance of the year.
Amazing.
So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Congratulations, Cory. In bargaining, there are like lots of things that you guys are talking about, right? There can be like dozens and dozens and dozens of proposals that come out of a working wages process
dozens
and focus
is
groups.
Like a really small number.
Really
so
small
we
number.
could pretend it's dozens, but
Okay.
it's way more than that. It's I would imagine you got to be close to 100 before you really have to start taking a look at what is viable and what's not viable, because it's important to like gather all the information, hear the ideas, present them all forward. Because what may seem like a great idea, once you start to talk to people who are on the ground, feet on the ground, right? They may go, hey, this is not really the situation we're experiencing whatsoever. Or you might have something else where you go, wow, that will really hurt us, potentially because of X. And you go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Right. Because you just don't know till you talk to everyone who works in those individual fields.
Totally.
Because we have, ACTRA, we're a pretty large umbrella union. We've got a lot of different, I don't want to say niches or specialties because...
Sure, but categories.
Categories, great categories. So we've got principal on camera, right? We have stunt, we have background, we have doubling, we have voice. We've got so many other things nowadays. There's talk of
dialect coaches,
intimacy coordinators. You've got your stunt
choreographers.
Everything.
There's terrified we're going to leave something out.
Ton of stuff, and please, if we do, it's not on purpose. You are fantastic. It's just cameras pointing, and we have forgotten.
And that is all encapsulated under the independent production agreement,
correct?
Which is what we're talking about
today.
Yeah. So out of these initial stages of the bargaining process, do you feel like there are some like major themes that are rising to the surface for you that you could talk a little bit about, even just on a cursory level to start?
Like, just to be very clear for everybody, we can't talk about the exact details within any of the proposals. We signed an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. And there's multiple reasons at the current moment why we're implementing that. However, what is definitely trending, you wouldn't have to look far at all to the other sister unions we have out there, right? We have SAG-AFTRA. We've looked at the Writers Guild for both the States and Canada, Directors Guild, Canada and the States. We have a really recurring trend, right? And that is definitely guardrails and protections around AI. That's a must. There needs to be some sort of, revisit on residuals, because with streaming, everything has changed. Everything has changed. Even anecdotally, some of the checks we're getting for shows that are incredibly successful are 42 cents, whereas that would not be the case before. And definitely production companies have figured out how to ensure that they don't have to pay. So we really need to take a hard look at that. And that is something that, our sister unions or person unions are identified. They were able to go out and put the stake in the ground. They were able to carve out some territory, and we definitely need to do the same thing. But we also have the benefit of seeing what they have achieved and see it in practice for a bit. And so hopefully we can have maybe version 2.0.
Yeah.
And then we can each build off of each other in a progressive way so that we can carve out and ensure that we have a possibility for livelihood, because we create as artists, but they're AI stealing. It's not creating anything. It is not possible to create new at this moment. It's not really artificial intelligence either, because it's not intelligence. It's just copying and repeating. So that's a major problem in terms of just even copyrights. How are you going to be able to have a continued existence if we don't find a way to ensure that as artists, whether it be, the various fields, currently we're just talking about, here in ACTRA, but we have to find a way that we can continue to work, do what we do, but also be compensated properly for it, right? I don't think we need to even pretend we could stop AI. That's not an option, nor would it make a lot of sense, because there's a lot of benefit that could be had from it industry-wide. I mean, there's a lot of things where you go, boy, that could really help. That could really, really help move the needle in a good way.
I recently met a PhD student who was headed to somewhere in Europe to work on AI tools for cancer research.
Yep.
And I was like, that's a phenomenal thing you're doing. I love that.
Yeah.
But I think I don't want to generalize for everyone, but definitely performers, I think, have a heightened sort of like weariness or fear around AI. And something that I think is really important to articulate about the unions and what we can really do is that because we have this huge bargaining unit of, almost 30,000 members across the country, we have a tool through collective bargaining to address performers' concerns around AI and maybe go after a few things. And there's 3 C's that I feel like you've already said one of them, but could you elaborate on like what those are? Because we're not getting into proposals, but let's just get really clear about defining like what can we do?
And this is something that's been discussed for a couple of years now.
Absolutely.
Right? So the 3 C's, it's a very creative way. So it's all about control. So you can control, you make sure that you want to be a part of a project. Right? It is very important that someone doesn't just go, hey, you were on season 1, we're going to plop you in here, but also you're going to be saying these horrendously things.
Totally.
And you should have the right to go, no, I don't ever want to have those words coming out of my mouth. Because, for me, I work a lot with kids and I work a lot in, children animation. I don't want to be ever saying certain things, because if someone does a little quick Google hit, you go, well, I can't have, this person here be on the kids show. So, for instance, I'm on Rubble and Crew, which is the Paw Patrol spinoff, which is currently on Netflix, trending number 2. Anyway, so I'm the villain on that one, but I got to be very clear. I don't want to be in certain projects because I don't want to be associated with that character, even if it's wonderfully written. I want to have the say, right? Because it is really important. And we've had lots of instances, for video games being one, because it's more the Wild West, where people are able to use AI, have the character say something completely inappropriate, and there's nothing really the performer can do other than please take it down. But it's horrific. Like, there are things you really should have control over, or scenes your body or face should never be involved in if you don't want to.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a little too free.
Yeah, the stakes are high. I think
incredibly so.
SAG-AFTRA is currently, it's not getting near as much press and coverage as the big agreement did last summer, but they're still on strike for video games. And I think that's the real crux is compensation and AI protections, right?
The compensation factor
so that's
is
the next
massive.
one. That's the next C.
So compensation in AI would, I understand. Let's see how to not get into specifics. Well, without getting in the way of AI progressing, we understand it needs to come into the industry. We do need to find a way to make sure that people are compensated for their time, for their work and effort. So if you are able to, video game, great example, you have people with performance capture, they walk around. Well, if you put them in for one day and then you want to roll them out for infinity, you should probably get paid for more than one day. Especially when you've taken that person's entire likeness, which is their ability to walk, talk, the creator or the character they've created. They want to, continue to infinity. That'd be wonderful to just get free money, which is what the production would be getting, because you've just got all your labor for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not okay, because there's a lot of work that goes into creating characters. I mean, why are some characters so remarkably indelible? And it can't just be how it was written. It can't just be how it was filmed. It has to have a huge part to do with the performer.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we need to make sure that as performers, we can continue to work in this industry, because we won't be able to if we don't carve out these bulwarks, these lines in the sand, so to speak, boundaries, because this is a precarious job. The vast, vast, vast majority of performers of all fields in North America, we don't make much money.
I think
at all. Everyone has a secondary job.
$12,000 being the median income of an actor performer. And obviously that's taking into consideration people that are, just working a little bit here and there by choice, all the way up to those that would be most memorable.
It's not a very high median, though.
No.
It's not at all.
It's far below the...
Yes. So we do have, I would call them precarious workers, vulnerable sector as well, because while we are a union, there's no such thing as seniority. We're not guaranteed a job, ever. You're not guaranteed a placement. You're not guaranteed anything. So we're always looking for work. We're working for work. But it's really important that we have a union, because when we do that, we're able to have our RSPs taken away. So we have, stuff savings. Because I got to tell you, if, as a 20-year-old, when I started out, if someone hadn't been taking a giant chunk of my checks and putting them somewhere else, I wouldn't have any savings.
But you'd have been to Hawaii a bunch.
I could have been to Hawaii, and I imagine I would have had fun and gone, man, I really wish I hadn't gone to Hawaii, because that was not worth the down payment on a house or something down the line. Healthcare has been, the health and benefits plan has been a lifesaver. I have children, and I got to tell you, being able to put the dependents on there, it has been, COVID was not fun.
No.
Has not been fun as a parent, and I'm sure lots of parents out there as well have gone through the same thing. So really thankful for the things that keep you alive as potentially as a family, because it's hard to even approach as an artist and think, how am I going to have kids or do anything, right, with such impermanence? So it's really helpful, immensely reassuring that at least you've got X covered, which could be health and dental, which could be at least I got some sort of RRSPs going, or something where I don't have to take it and put it over, because boy, it is tight right now.
Absolutely.
It is so tight right now.
You've talked about it in ways that are really personal, but like, this is what a union can do, right? Yeah. A union can look at its workers and go, like, what are the needs? And through collective bargaining, we can make sure that all those anything that's loose gets tightened up, and anything that's left open can have something new put in there, right? Hopefully. Yeah. So you talked about, you did talk about control, you talked about consent, and you talked about compensation. Something else that you talked about was all of the work that goes in. And so I feel like, as voice performers, people don't necessarily, they may not see or understand like the work that goes into what they hear. So people that work in voice with us, they know, but maybe you want to give a little bit of an understanding of like, what's it like to be a voice performer, and especially in animation. Yeah. And then maybe I can have you go into how well, let's just start there.
Sure, absolutely. There. Yeah. I'll start it off as I used to be on camera as well.
Okay.
But as a voice performer, we probably have a little easier for auditions. I'll be very clear from the get-go. We don't have to worry about hair and makeup. We don't have to worry about wardrobe. We don't have to worry about lighting. And even more importantly, and I think it would be great if we could get rid of it, we don't have to worry about memorizing lines for auditions, because why do you have to memorize lines for auditions? Apparently we do on camera. Love to see that get changed.
Love to see that get changed.
We don't have to do that, and that is very... the burden is less. Yeah. However, it's not nothing. So as voice performers with COVID, the download has been real. Everyone had to, if you wanted to do voice, and everybody wants to do voice, especially during COVID, the outreach we got at the voice committee, I was chair at the time, we had hundreds and hundreds of emails, everyone asking, how can I get into voice? What microphones are the right, what do I need to do for a setup? So there's a huge cost downloaded onto the performers, because
barrier, like it's a cost barrier.
Oh, yes. Like, now there's always been from casting, and there are enough anecdotes where they've taken someone off of a cell phone, but in the real aspect of it, I mean, real world practice is if 10 people sound fantastic and 3 sound like they're on the subway, you're going to naturally be inclined towards the better sound. Absolutely. It is how it goes, right? Absolutely. Even if you try your best, there's the human aspect to it of subconsciously, I just like that sound more. Yeah. So everyone has had to up their game, which means all of our auditions sound better, but there's a cost. Microphones are not cheap. You can get very good usable microphones, but it depends if you want to be recording sessions from home, which is what we had to do. Exactly. The minimums are higher, several thousands of dollars at least. Then you also had to get different services that you had to have online so you could be able to patch in, because there was no free patch system right off the bat that came out of it. But there was quite a bit of purchasing of different types of things where you end up using it 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have casting workbook, which is a cost that's been downloaded onto us a while ago. I mean, it is more work. The turnover is crazy. I think the turnover, I know people on camera as well get really, really quick turnovers. In voice, anecdotally, we get stuff like an audition at 5 p.m. because who knows when it has been sent to the agent. I'm going to assume it's been within the proper time frame. But they're also getting stuff late, and then it's due by tomorrow at noon. And so you then have to, for those who don't have a permanent setup at home, you got to drag your stuff out of your closet. They have to set up the booth. They have to look at what it is. If it's animation, I got to do all my beats, got to break down. And then you have to figure out what the character may even sound like. Because with animation, it's almost never you. You're going to have to find where the voice may come from. And that can, depending on the individual, can take quite a while. I know lots of people who, they would say that having to do self-tapes now have made it so much harder. Because they don't have someone who goes, we're good. Yeah. Right? So if you're...
Bring it up, bring it down, move it here, move it there.
Or even just stop. Great, you're done. It was great. That was fine. Exactly. I got lots of friends who have messaged me like, I'm on take 20. I don't know what to do. I need another night. And it's like, wow, like, I get it, because you're spinning your own wheels, because we are not meant to perform in little black boxes to nothing with no response. Yeah. We aren't. Even on film and TV, you have your fellow performers on set. You have all the wonderful people, the set, you have crew. There's interaction, but in a booth, without even having another person on the other side of the glass, you go nuts.
And yeah, just to highlight that, like what we're talking about is all of those other jobs. So there were other jobs people were getting paid to do.
Correct.
Engineering, directing, several other things going on there have now been downloaded onto the performer. So when we're talking about unpaid hours and then looking at that median income of $12,000 and going, wait, how is a performer who's just starting out in this industry, especially, meant to get up and over into a place where they could be even in contention for some of these parts? But that's not to dismiss families, like yourself, like you're saying, like just because I have some success and I have a strong career doesn't mean that my home is perfectly set up to be doing this all of the time. It's so there's an accessibility issue, there's an inclusion issue there's all kinds of things that kind of come together when you're breaking this apart, and that's kind of what I'm getting from you too. So
different for each person, and depending on their lives and who they live with and where they live. I mean, if depending on the apartment or condo you live in, if the subway's nearby or a streetcar, there's nothing in the world you can do to cut that sound out. Yeah, right? That absolutely. Bass cuts through buildings and concrete. It just travels right through the rebar. It is the hardest sound to get rid of. So you're really kind of stuck sometimes. It is not the best quality product either. I mean, there was for a period of time in animation where they had to put a little thing across the screen saying this was recorded during COVID. Wow. To say, because the audio quality may drop. Yeah. But guess what's happened? People aren't going into the booths still the same. It really is city specific. For example, in Vancouver, people have been going into the booths the whole time. They never really shut down. Travel the country and you will find Ontario was its own special little hell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we really
we did know that, but I didn't recognize the relationship between.
It's very different.
I was going to ask you to talk about like how things, I don't want to say deteriorated, but sure. But that is essentially it. But I feel like you did get there. So I'm thinking maybe what voice performers would love to hear is like just your honest take on how well represented you feel through this process as a voice performer, talking to voice performers through this podcast that we have, like, what do you want to share with people
about this current set of negotiations?
Voice and how voice is represented at the table. We talked a little bit before we got here today about
that
bargaining
whole prep thing.
Well, that whole prep call. Like in past years of bargaining, you may have a specialist in voice come in for a couple of days, but there's seat and vote representation.
Very different. Yeah, very different.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think. I could be wrong, but I think the amount of people involved in terms of voting members and alternates is more than doubled. Yes. That's a lot of voices. Yeah. I'll highlight the only negative I saw, and it's not really negative, it's just more voices or more opinions, means more discourse. So it took longer than expected, but a lot of really good discourse. Yeah. I think it's so important to have people who, I don't want to say specialists because I don't want to give power in a negative way to saying that someone is not a specialist, but people who really know their little slice well, or their, what did we call it earlier? called it something. Category.
Category?
There you go. See, good word.
Yeah.
Who know their category really well because, having a discourse on what is honestly needed is really important. I think it's great. I won't give any particulars, but being able to listen to the people who represent the background performers, for example, talk about what background performers need and why. I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm really glad you weren't asking me for my opinion to vote on that without having other people come in to talk about the real world experience, because it's incredibly different.
Yeah, it's so important, Cory. Historically, background performers were, and even day players were cut and divided by movie stars through the studios. That was intentional. You know, people think how did we come up with that? Is it because some people were more special than others? It's like, no, Hollywood recognized, and I have lots of research on this as well, but that if they moved people that they considered to be stars over here and separated them from day players and background actors, they could divide our power.
They could cause a separation of
bringing all those voices together. Absolutely. But bringing all those voices together at the bargaining table, I feel is really important for all kinds of categories to feel like, oh, I'm heard, I'm seen, I'm represented.
Yeah, and to know why something needs to be fought for, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, something as simple as chairs for people to sit on, which is like, are you kidding me? This is a conversation? For real? Chairs? Okay. There's really simple things that happen where you go, that makes a ton of sense. Yes, let's talk about this issue because often something can fall through the crack of what seems like common sense, but maybe a CBA should be a common sense collectively bargained agreement too, because they go, oh, this is pretty common sense, but all right, let's put it into letters because you don't think it is common sense.
It shows you too,
such as respect for the other person you're working with.
Absolutely.
Right? Wouldn't it be nice to know where you had to be or at what time to be on set less than 6 hours in advance, or be going, oh, well, I know I need to get up really early, but I'd love to go to bed and know where the heck I need to be and at what time. Or for background performers, whether or not they need to be in hair and makeup, which is outrageous to think about, right? That's really last minute. How do you really do your job to its best if you're worried about details that should be solved ahead of time so you can just focus on doing the best job as a performer? Because you're still carrying multiple hats at once until you're on set, when you really should be, hey, I'd love to be able to take this time and focus on my scene so I can nail all the beats.
Yeah,
so I can be prepared for my other performer to throw something new at me and go, wow, that's a great idea, so I can respond in the moment to give them a really good take, because that way we don't have to repeat it or it feels forced or, oh, let's repeat that again. It's like, yeah, but that spontaneous moment, that was the one. That's what you want, right?
That's that stuff, that magic in artistry comes out of being taken care of on these really basic levels.
Yes.
I feel like that's maybe a good time to segue into talking about what the collective agreement can do and what we do when we get to the bargaining table. So we talked a little bit about this before, which is ACTRA builds the ground. Performers, we build the ground through our collective bargaining process. Yeah. And when I say build the ground, I mean we build the basic minimums.
Yep. Minimum payments and minimum regulations.
Yes.
And set of expectations and working conditions. Yeah. The minimum. Yeah. Ask for more. Yes. Ask for more. Please ask for more.
Let's ask for more. And the more is, as our executive director, Alistair Hepburn, just said, is the house that the performer can build that house on the ground. Yep. Maybe not a house in this economy, but a structure.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, a structure, a tent. We can build a tent.
You work over your career. You work with maybe an agent if that's part of your process, and you build that structure. But then we have things like the economy and inflation that come along, and we are not the people to break down.
I am not an economist. I am not a mathematician.
I wouldn't do it to you, Cory.
Please
I
don't.
Promise.
Thank you. But what I can do is the math on my paychecks, and that's it.
Yeah, and when you go into bargaining, it's like this whole process, and when you come out, you hope that what happens to your paycheck?
Well, I would hope that the paycheck starts to reflect the reality of what inflation has brought onto us. Groceries are incredibly expensive. Rent is incredibly expensive. If people are not aware, the COVID time has caused the largest shift in financial power in humanity, even back more than kings and queens. So the rich are way richer, and there's almost no middle class now that's been eroded. So we really need to ensure that the living costs are matched.
Yeah.
Because you can't jack up the prices for bread by 5 times and then pay someone 1% more. It does not work.
The math doesn't math.
No, the math doesn't math, and there are more of us than there are of the rich people.
Yeah.
And when we talk about rich, like, the divide is so large. What used to be, I think, the top 1%, remember when they had all the protests about the top 1%? Mm-hmm. That economic category is someone who makes $100,000 a year now. That's how much it has dropped. So now, if you want to make, so now you're in the 0.1% is who you're protesting. That's how much it's changed. You're now protesting the 0.1% because it's gone. Just the whole middle has gone so fast.
Played out that way.
It's so crazy.
I'm always going to bring it back to, like, that's the power of a union. You know, that's the power of collective agreements. That's the reason to listen to this podcast, the reason to talk to your bargaining team members and get involved and, start to prepare for. The
good news is with this largest divide, you've also seen the most amount of strikes and largest gains in labor history. Like you're seeing massive, massive gains.
Now we're just talking, it was hot labor summer. And it's just like hot labor fall, hot labor spring. Hot labor winter.
It's a crazy amount of labor unions that are stepping up because you have to. I mean, it's not people going, oh, I would like a little more dental, or I would love, like a little top up at Christmas. We're talking about existential threats.
Absolutely.
We're not if we need to secure these things because it will not be a sustainable living as an artist in Canada otherwise. It's not just we won't do as well. It's like, no, we're really looking at a Mad Max apocalyptic future for Canadian artists because we won't have anyone to ensure you get paid. You won't have any legal mechanism when someone wants to take your IP, your copyright, your idea, and put it into another project. We really, really, really have to right now. It's just unfortunate that we've had the NCA lockout, which is still continuing, that we've had the rise of AI, we've had COVID, and we've had inflation hit all at the same time. This is like a crazy 4 generations at once whacked into one time, and it feels like the end of all times. And you're not alone in feeling like it is the end of all times in our industry. But I do have a lot of positives in that, like if you look at SAG-AFTRA, they were on the brink and they've carved out their territory. They have a future. And, the next collective bargaining agreement can be even better. We build on it, right? We need to get this one in, right? And then we can make the next one even better. This one is so pivotal. Yeah. We need to have those changes. We need to get it going. We need to have membership understand that what is happening, it's not just a little bit. We're talking about a pure existential threat, whether you're on camera, whether your background, whether your voice. All of us can be replaced by AI relatively quickly. I know the technology is not perfect yet. It will be, but it is so fast. Yeah. And there is no ethical approach being put in, and there is zero government help yet. So it's two-pronged. We need to, as collective bargaining units, set up our rules with our employers, and then at the same time get the provinces and the territories and the federal level also putting in rules, just as we see in the EU, who are way ahead of us. Yeah. And now we see some stuff in California putting in that you cannot use the likeness. That's great. We need more rules, but oh my goodness. All of this has been implemented in a real-world application light years before anyone has taken a legal look at it, which is a real shame because the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 to 5 years, which is roughly the amount of time that would pass between one bargaining period within ACTRA at least to the next.
Yep.
A lot is going to happen.
Yeah,
a lot has happened, and now a lot is going to happen.
Normally
so,
in a 3-year span, you may have 1 or 2 items. In a 3-year span, with the way the technology is increasing exponentially, I mean, it's scary what could happen in 3 years if we don't get these guardrails in place. Because let alone in what 1 year could be. 3 years? I mean, we can't even conceive of it. Honestly, whatever we come up with is going to be below what will probably occur at this point.
To stay upright, to stay hopeful, I feel like we have to just, continue to have these conversations, educate ourselves, and figure out like how we're going to build enough power to get what we need to get across the table. Yeah. Okay, I have maybe 1 or 2 more things I wanted to chat with you about. You mentioned you're a parent, but also you're a performer who works with kids a lot.
I do.
if you were the parent of a child actor listening to the Reel Talk podcast, is there anything you would want to hear? Or, maybe I should just set that up a little bit better. I think in 2017 is when, through our collective agreement process, the government actually put in the Child Protection Act for child workers, because ours is the only industry where kids can actually be
It is the only industry where kids can be employed.
Right.
Right?
So all the more reason why we need a really secure collective agreement. So that's just to set the stage there.
Yes.
Could you...
Working with kids is interesting. I've had the opportunity of working with kids both on set many times, working with kids in the booth hundreds and hundreds of times, and then as a parent, every day. Kids are, taking care of the kids is the most important thing. Let's be very clear. Yes, they are union members, and yes, they are working. I have heard far too often, they're working, they should do X. No, they shouldn't. They're kids, first and foremost. They need to be treated as kids and respected as kids. They need to be the safest person on set, right? They need to be protected. It is our job as a union to protect our members. And if we know we have one group who is not allowed to work anywhere else except for here, it's our job to ensure that they're safe on set regardless. We cannot ensure anyone's safety outside of the set and what happens at home, but we should be able to ensure that when a member who is a child steps on a set or into a booth, that they are safer there than anywhere else. Yeah. And that is absolutely important. And that also includes with AI, because there are massive questions about, you talk about digital replicas and scanning. What about children? I think ethically we need to really take a look about how we as adults can give informed consent. Right? If you, for instance, were offered a campaign and they said, hey, we wanted to do X and we want to incorporate being able to tweak, the bi-week line, but we'll give you X compensation. You could say, you as an adult who understands their industry, you could talk to your agent or, legal representative just to make sure you're happy with all the legalese in it, but you could give informed consent. A child cannot give informed consent. So you're then asking either their parent or custodian or caregiver to give consent. But again, you're giving it for someone else. I think it's really important that we start looking at that, because there are too many stories of child performers as adults where they go, I'm happy I survived. The byline should not be, I survived as a child performer. No. Right? So it says something that we really do need to ensure that they are prioritized even more so, and that their safety is key.
And you feel like this, thank you for all of that, Cory. It's obvious this is really important to you, as it is for all of us, but you feel like these are the things that you got to have really good, deep conversations about at the bar. Or
definitely had some very honest, frank conversations in the room. I feel like we've got a really good start. It's not a final thing. Because we still have to negotiate. Yeah,
and so when do you go to Montreal?
We leave for Montreal, I think November 3rd, I believe. It's a Sunday.
Here's a pop quiz. Who do we bargain the IPA with?
Oh my goodness, it's on my sheet in front of me right over here. Thank God, because there's so many acronyms these days. I am utterly lost with them all.
Just give me one.
All right, the CMPA.
Okay.
Which are the Canadian Motion Picture Alliance, the CMPA, which is the Canadian Motion Picture Alliance. So that's one of the groups that we'll be working with. They also are corresponding with the American Motion Picture Alliance as well, because
AMPTP.
Yes, of course, because it rolls off the tongue when you say it like that. Totally. All of the acronyms will be in the room together.
The AMPTP, as I understand it, works through the CMPA. So they'll set up an office here, and then they get their sort of branches go through the CMPA. So they have, I'm just sharing.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I
read the papers more than you did.
You did a much better job than I
did. Cory, is there anything else you feel like we should cover today?
I would just like to say to the voice people out there as well that wonderful person named Anna Sani, who is on our negotiating team as well, and she is extremely wise in the world of animation and whatnot. And so it was great to have her there, because we did have voice representation. I'm quite happy with it. I would love to talk about the details, but I'm not going to talk about the details. But if we can get some of these through, it's going to be really, really fantastic for the voice performers. And we do have some things that are already in negotiation that have been agreed to, such as we have the dubbing agreement. There's, I think, the vast majority of that has already been agreed to with
Right.
the CMPA, which is
Because there were
huge.
like pre-bargaining days on
Yes.
two major
fronts. One is
Yeah.
dubbing, which
Yeah.
has always been its own separate agreement, but tied in.
Yeah.
And then now hair and makeup,
Yeah.
because hair and makeup, this is something that should have been done a long time ago.
Absolutely.
But hair and makeup has...
And continuing the good work that
Yes.
the bargaining team did.
Yeah, they did.
last
So
summer.
big kudos to those two individual teams, the dubbing team and the hair and makeup team. Great work. You did a lot of work, and it's fantastic. So hopefully we can come home with a giant win. And it would be great if it's all solved on day one. One can dream.
Yeah, one can dream.
Yeah.
Cory, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for all the good work.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Reel Talk. Please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow us on wherever you get your favorite podcasts.